excuse for doing nothing to change it. But the Philippines now says otherwise. Treating migrant workers as property makes them slaves, which is intolerable. We see no difference between master and worker, mistress and helper. Using the compact as a higher platform, we continue to lobby hard to reform and finally do away with kafalat. Our fight against kafalat continues to pay off, step by step. Every reform, however small, is better than doing nothing at all. I thank you all here in this forum. We are not alone. We are moving forward to the goal of migrant protection for all, according them decency and equal respect wherever they are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Locsin. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the opening message of His Excellency Rodrigo Roa Duterte, the President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We all agree that the migration contributes to growth and development in both origin and destination in countries. But this comes with costs and challenges to both sides. To be truly sustainable and transformative, migration must work for all stakeholders. This is our collective challenge and our shared responsibility. The Philippines recognizes its sovereign right to each state to adopt its own migration policy. But there are universal liberties and moral standards we must adhere at all times. We cannot justify the denial of basic human rights and the fundamental freedoms of any individual regardless of status. That is why the Philippine government strongly calls for the complete abolition of the kafala system sooner rather than later. The kafala system is unjust, exploitative. It places thousands of migrant workers, particularly in household workers, in the most vulnerable situation, unseen, unheard, and unable to defend their dignity as a human being. We are all familiar with the very painful stories of abuse from inhumane working conditions to non-payment of wages, from restriction of movements to denial of health care, migration of sexual exploitation to outright murder. For the Philippines and the Filipinos, these tales are realities that hit us hard. This has got to stop. The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed migrant workers, especially those under the kafala system, to even more precarious positions. As the world went into lockdowns, many were driven into destitution with no job, no social safety nets, and no money to send back home. This cannot go on. We must address the structural inequalities and post-migrant workers to the grim reality. Our pandemic responses must be inclusive with no room for any kind must be left behind as we march towards recovery. I welcome the reform initiatives of Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and of course, Bahrain. I am hopeful that Saudi Arabia's labor reform initiative will significantly improve the working conditions of migrants workers in the kingdom, including the 800,000 Filipinos. Certainly, the Philippine government assumes its part with the responsibility in ensuring that our people live in safety and dignity wherever they may be. As I have said before, the Filipino is not a slave to anyone, anywhere. I dream of the day when working abroad becomes a choice and not a need for my countrymen. My government remains committed to our country's long-term vision of providing stable, comfortable, and secure life for all Filipinos in their own very land. But while this remains a vision the Philippines strongly advocates, works with all partners to realize the global compact of safe, orderly, and regular migration. We continue to bravely speak against the ills of kafala system. We will be relentless in our efforts to dismantle this unjust structure. And we will never tire from seeking greater cooperation with all those who want these iniquities and suffering to end once and for all. This is the right thing to do. This is what is expected of us. And this is the only way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, for your clear and strong message to fully commit not only for the protection of all migrants, but to embrace and push for labor reforms for the benefit of all migrants, particularly the welfare of our overseas Filipino workers. At this point, let me now go to the main discussion and yeah. By way of sorry for that technical glitch. Okay. By way of background, on November 4, 2020, the Saudi Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development announced the launching of the Labor Reform Initiative, which took effect on March 14, 2021. The LRI seeks to improve labor mobility, wherein the migrant workers can transfer to another employer without the current employer's consent upon the expiration of the contract between the worker and the employer. Or the migrant worker may travel outside the kingdom without the employer's approval after submitting the request, and the migrant worker may leave the kingdom without their employer's consent after the expiration of their contract. The LRI complements the kingdom's other reforms, such as the wage protection system, the digital documentation of the work contract, and the labor education awareness initiative. The LRI is also in line with the National Transformation Program of the Kingdom's 2030 vision. These migrant labor governance reforms in the kingdom came at the same period as similar reforms are also being pursued in other countries in the Gulf region, such as those implemented in the Kingdom of Bahrain in the state of Qatar. To set us the scene and give us more information about LRI, please join me in warmly welcoming our main resource person, the Honorable Satam Al-Harbi, the Deputy Minister for Inspection and Work Environment Development of the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Deputy Minister Al-Harbi holds a bachelor's degree in law from the King's Sod University, a master's degree from Case Western Reserve University in the United States, and an MBA from the Saudi Electronic University in cooperation with the Colorado University. He has more than 19 years of experience working with different entities in leading position in legal and administrative roles in private and government sectors in Saudi Arabia. Deputy Minister Al-Harbi, please take the floor.
Hello, good afternoon, distinguished delegates. Thank you, Mr. Asik. I would like to thank the Republic of Philippines for hosting this panel. Also, thank the IOM for their efforts in this forum. Also, I'd like to thank in this forum His Excellency Teodoro Locsin, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Philippines, and His Excellencies Adnan Alonto, Philippine Ambassador of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Mrs. Sarah Rowley, Undersecretary for Migrant Workers. Also, I'd like to welcome the participants here, His Excellency Abdullah Al-Busairi, Saudi Ambassador for Philippines, and Mr. Osama Labsi, Mr. Muhammad Zargani from IOM, and Mrs. Kristen Dadi from IOM, and all participants and attendees. If you allow me to share the screen, please, Mr. Asik. Here.
Go ahead.
So I'm glad to be sharing and exchange knowledge with all delegates participating in this panel. Today I will be sharing with you some of the recent reform made in Saudi Arabia in the labor market, including the Vision 2030, improving wage working condition for expatriates and wage protection system, and e-labor contracts, documentation program, and also friendly settlement disputes, and finally the labor reform initiative. Starting from the trigger for this reform from our Vision 2030, which was based on three main pillars, as a vibrant society and a thriving economy and ambitious nation. From those pillars, we have a transformational program which helped to achieve our Vision 2030, which include several strategic goals. Here I would like to focus on three main goals, which actually dedicated for expatriates as a recognition from the country for their important roles in the economy. The improving life condition for expatriates as one of the main strategic goals in our Vision 2030, and also improving the working condition for expatriates and source relevant foreign talent effectively as also another strategic goal to attract global talent. Here we'll focus on goal number 4.4.2, which improving working condition for expatriates. This goal has four main initiatives, which wage protection program, e-labor contract documentation program, friendly settlement dispute, and labor reform initiative. And wage protection program, this program has been completed by December 2020 to cover all establishments. In short, this program is mandated for all establishments to pay the wages for employees through banking system, which allow the ministry to supervise and ensure the payment in time and in the right amount. And the ministry can interfere in any delay of the failure for the employer to pay the salary on time. The objective of this initiative, as it's mentioned here, increasing attractiveness of the labor market, and also most important is safeguard the rights for the employees. Now we have also following and monthly monitoring to monitor all the establishments and their compliance to the system. We established a platform called Mudded. This platform it's facilitated the payment of salary in different channels. The employer can transfer wages through mobile phone, through banking system, through the technology and different technology tools. And also it's linked with the employee. So the employee can confirm if the employees can confirm if they receive the wages on time, or they can also open a ticket if they want to complain about any delay. It's based on a whole government approach. We were implemented with different government agencies, including Central Bank, GOSI, and Ministry of Human Resources. The second initiative is e-labor contract documentation program. And this program has been also implemented in the private sector to cover 100 of establishments. All establishments, regardless their size, they are obligated to authenticate all their employees' contracts. This done by also a platform that has been launched recently in November 2020. We have set an application, a contract that's aligned with and comply with the labor law, where the employer need to fill this contract with optional field, and then it goes to the employee by SMS message to the employee then can either approve the contract or reject the contract. So once the employee approve the contract, it's become authenticated and linked directly with the Ministry of Justice, Central Bank, and GOSI to ensure the employee are registered in the right wages to receive the right compensation, and the Ministry of Human Resources to ensure the compliance of employer for labor contract. Now we starting from November 2020, we reach more than the recent numbers, more than 4 million contract has been authenticated, and we plan to complete 100%, which almost 9 million contracts by the coming 3 months. Friendly settlement disputes. Also, this is an electronic system. Any employee or employer who has disputes can submit electronic request to solve a dispute. The disputes will be solved by specialists, trained specialists from the Ministry of Human Resources to solve the disputes electronically by discussing with both parties the issue and trying to solve it in a friendly way. If the two parties didn't reach an agreement, the system transferred the case to the specialist court, the labor court. So the employee, they don't need to hire a lawyer at all. They just submit the request online. The request goes to the friendly settlement. If the settlement hasn't been solved within 21 days, directly the system will transfer it to the labor court. The labor court will set an appointment for the both parties and proceed. And also this system will directly issue a work permit for the employee. We know that in some cases, if there is a dispute between the employer and the employee wants continue help working in this entity. So once the employee submits our request a friendly settlement, the employee will be offered a work permit if they want to work in anywhere until the case has been solved. This is just a number, more than 243 million reals, which has been paid for workers through friendly settlements during 2020. And more than almost 50% of the cases has been solved, and the other 50 has been transferred to the labor court. Now we come to the labor reform initiative, and the programs that I mentioned before were as enabler for us to implement the labor reform initiative. Authenticated the contracts, in completing the wage protection system, and also completing the electronic friendly settlements was enabler and prerequisites to establish and launch the labor reform initiative. The labor reform initiative objective of this initiative is preserving the rights of worker, increasing flexibility in labor market, improving the local work environment, and raise productivity of workers, ensure the rights for all parties to the contractual relationship, reducing requirement or recruitment cost, since the recruitment internally will be more flexible instead of requesting or recruiting from outside. And also, this initiative has three main services: the employment mobility service, which allow job mobility for workers, expatriates, between establishment within specific condition that take into account the rights for both parties, employers and employees, and we'll come to the details later. And also the automatic exit visa, either return visa or final visa. And the initiative journey, we'll go through the journey in some detail here, starting from the initial vision. We looked into policies of contractual relation between employee and employers in more than 30 countries. And also we have done several studies and research, and also referred to different study has been done through this issue. And the finding was that the studies recommended the importance of reforming the system, which increase flexibility, the labor market, and also achieve our goals in increasing productivity of expatriates, raise the competitiveness of the Saudi also labor market, and retain and attract talent in the labor market. Also, we conduct, as this is a huge change in the labor market, we try to ensure that to cover all stakeholders, we conduct several workshops in the private sector with the private sector to discuss all details and the policies that we will launch in the services. Also, we conduct several meetings and alignment with government entities to ensure the right implementation, and also ensure the alignment with all government entities to ensure the right implementation. Also, we done a dialogue, internal dialogue with large group of private sector in different sectors, and we found that there is tendency brought these initiatives and these services. Also, now I will discuss the details of the initiatives. In labor mobility, actually it's allowed expatriates, as mentioned, to change job without requiring the consent or approval of the current employer. The only condition that is here is completing first 12 months from entering the country. So for any expatriates who completed 1 year in the country. After 1 year, they will be allowed to transfer to another employer, regardless the contract, either it's valid or it's end, but there is different cases. If the contract expire, they definitely will be allowed to transfer or change employer through an electronic service. If the contract is still valid, they can also transfer by solving and sorting the contract condition with the employer, current employer. This service will it's covered all employer and private sector, no exception for anyone who working in private sector. For the second services, which is automatic exit, re-entry visa, and final visa. This also will allow expatriates to submit an online request to leave or travel, either for a temporary reason or for final reason. For a temporary reason, they have to have authenticated contract. But if the employee wants to leave for exit visa, for final exit visa, they will grant the permission. They can leave the country, either the contract is valid or at the end of the contract. So if the employee decides to leave the country at the end of the contract, in this case, there is no issue at all, because the employee has completed the contract and either can leave the country or can transfer to any other employer. If the contract is still valid, they also want the requests won't be rejected. They can leave the country anytime. But if there is a condition in the contract, they need to fulfill the condition to meet the contracted conditions. Also, in our journey, we reach the announcement and raising awareness among stakeholders. We announced the services in 4th of November 2020. Also issue a manual for the policies, several media interviews and training materials and training courses conducted for employees and employers. Also, we had several workshops with different entities and organizations. World Bank, IMF offered 30 embassies in Saudi Arabia, over 800 investors and foreign investors, also and with GCC countries and Saudi's chambers. This is some of the media reaction, which was highly appreciate the initiative, and different international organization and different international channels. And here we reached the implementation. We implemented the services in 14 of March 2021. The last actually update, we more than 15,000 employees has been benefited from the mobility. They transferred to another employer without the consent of the current employer, as it's mentioned in the services. All services available in electronic platforms for mobility in a platform called Quwa, under the supervision of Ministry of Human Resources. For exit visa under Abshir platform under the Ministry of Interior. Last but not least, the evaluation. We have set several KPIs to monitor the services and ensure that this initiative is achieving its goal and implemented in the right way. So here I reach the end of this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Deputy Minister Al Harbi, for setting the scene for today's discussion. I was listening to you intently, and I noticed that this is an exciting time for you in Saudi Arabia with all these reforms on the labor contract, with the digitization of the labor contracts, the alternative dispute settlement mechanisms that you are implementing, and with your description, it's very apt that you describe it as a friendly alternative dispute mechanism for resolution of labor cases. The third one is that we're excited about your more flexible recruitment procedure and wage protection program. And lastly, but not the least, of course, your center of this is the labor mobility, wherein a worker could change employer, a worker could exit the kingdom without need, or with less administrative burden imposed on him as a departing or a worker who has finished his contract. Thank you very much for setting that and saying that for this forum. By the way, as I speak now, I was told by colleagues that there are about 550 live participants in our forum today. So it's quite a big number for all those people all over the world listening and watching this program or in this virtual forum. At this point, we now like to hear from our panel of reactors, who will be given about 10 minutes each to share their reactions on the previous discussions of Deputy Minister Al-Harbi. I would like first to introduce to you Mr. Osama Abdullah Al-Absi. Mr. Al-Absi is the former Chief Executive Officer of the Labor Market Regulatory Authority of the Kingdom of Bahrain. He spearheaded the labor mobility reforms in the Kingdom of Bahrain that has now resulted in the innovative Flexi Visa Scheme, which allows migrant workers to be an agent of their own skills in the employment market and paved the way for the regularization of the status of migrants who were formerly on irregular status. In previous forums, he had sparked a very interesting discussion on labor reforms and skills, as he asserted that reform and change management is a process, and that freedom of mobility is a pillar of all labor reforms. Once reforms have flourished and migrant workers have the freedom of choice, there would be a need to develop and upgrade skills of migrants in order to have an advantage from the nationals. Mr. Al-Absi, having heard Deputy Minister Al-Harbi describe the reforms process in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, from your experience in the managing labor reforms in Bahrain, can you share your thoughts on the process you have undergone and the possible pitfalls and challenges that may be encountered as reforms are being implemented? Mr. Absel, you may take the floor.
Thank you, Rico. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, the government of the Philippines, the government of Saudi Arabia, IOM, and everyone attending today. As well, I'd like to congratulate my colleagues and brothers in Saudi Arabia for launching their reform initiative. It's an exciting time. I know it doesn't come easy. I know it comes with a lot of political pressures, economic pressures, and it is a sign of leadership and forward thinking from the government of Saudi Arabia. I wish them all the luck. Rico, you're right. I do believe that mobility is the core of reforming kafala. I actually do believe that in the presence of true mobility, we don't have kafala anymore. We just have a migration management system just like anyone else. Reason being, once a person is given the choice to stay or leave, not only do they exercise their own rights, but they collectively force the workplace, force the employers, force the economy to improve the working conditions. And I'm going to allude to that in what I'm going to say today. But we have to always remember that mobility is not only giving rights to the migrant worker, it also gives an advantage to the local worker to be able to compete in the labor market because it levels the playing field from an administrative point of view. And it gives dynamism and ability to quickly react to the economy. We have reached a stage in Bahrain where we saw about 17 or 18% of the entire migrant labor market mobilize in a year. In my opinion, a dynamic economy requires 20 to 25% mobilization. Even after 13 years of implementation in Bahrain, we're still thriving to get it to a higher number. After giving my congratulations to my colleagues and friends in Saudi Arabia, I need to give them a few pointers of our experience in rolling out such an important point. For everyone's benefit, I've actually managed the labor reform project as well as the labor Market Regulatory Authority since 2004 up till the end of 2020. So what I'm going to say comes with about 16, 17 years of experience in exactly just doing that. To understand the potential challenges that our colleagues and friends in Saudi Arabia are undertaking and what lies ahead, one must look at the old sponsorship system, not only as an administrative and legal system, but also as a socio-economic system. For decades, the businesses, the hundreds of thousands of businesses in a given economy have relied on the law to keep their employees with them. Basically, the law had stopped the employees from leaving. And that, even with the best of employers, means a different dynamism between them and their workers. You see, the wage structure is built on the fact that the worker can't leave. The working conditions, the safety, the comfort of the working conditions is based on the fact that the worker can't leave and can't change that. The living arrangements is built on the fact that the worker can't leave. The whole business model depends on it. This is how they structured their cost. This is how they structured their administrative and their HR and their working hours. So to come and say today, you're going to change that, the government and the law is not going to guarantee that that particular worker is going to stay with you anymore. It changes the relationship at its core. The employer has not developed any skills in attempting to retain the worker, to keep him happy, to keep him engaged and looking towards the future. They never needed to do it. They never needed to do it in Bahrain before. That is because the government and the law and the CIFAL sponsorship system, it made it for them. So the employers didn't have to develop any human resources skills to retain, to engage, to deal with. The employer didn't have to measure what he's paying to the worker against the prevailing wage, whether he's paying a fair or not. So what happens once this new regulation is rolled out is that the employers will have to change their wage structure because employees are going to leave if they are underpaid. And that's a change to their cost. They will have to change their working environment, improve their working environment so the workers would stay, and that's cost. And they'll have to basically change the way they look, not only as worker, but at the whole business. That will change the entire practice. That will shake them to the core, which is really good. It's not bad. It's something that is needed because these markets have been stagnant for decades. We need to catch up with the practices of the rest of the world. However, and I say this again, based on the experience of rolling out this exact reform back in 2008 in Bahrain. So it's been 13 years since we did this particular one. They will not accept the change easily. And what was guaranteed previous to them by the regulations and the laws of kafala, they will try to now do themselves. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to vindicate or villainize the employers. No, but that's the system that's the only system that they know and they have known for decades. And people will always try to retain whatever they've developed with, they've made money with, and they don't know an alternative. So what we've seen in Bahrain over the last 13 years since we rolled this is that the employers will attempt in good faith, but they'll still try to attempt to retain the old system. They try to do it in another way. So they'll retain the passports in order to stop the worker from. They will put ridiculously long contract periods and then put penalty clauses in the contract period, in the contract, so that the worker will have to compensate. And if the worker wants to mobilize, they will, in many cases we have seen, they will take the worker to court to ask for damages and compensation. Now, I have seen one of the largest, if not the largest, contractor in Bahrain take every mason that wants to leave him to court to demand compensation. It's not because he wants compensation. He's telling other workers, if you leave me, this is what's going to happen. I'll take you to court. And the idea is, one way or the other, he's trying to retain them. There is, of course, debt, whether it's a real debt or not, where the worker is indebted to the employer. There are restrictive clauses that they can do, like telling a worker, you can leave, but you undertake not to work with a competitor of mine. If the worker is a cook or a chef in a restaurant, the only job he can do is a cook or a chef. Inevitably, he will work with a competitor, and there is no secrets of the trade that he's taking with them. And to be honest, we reached the stage where in Bahrain, the courts will dismiss all these cases. But to be honest, the workers themselves don't know that the court will dismiss it. And just the fact that there is this clause in the contract means that they will refrain from using their right to mobilize because they know there is a penalty clause. Although, like in the case of Bahrain, we have reached an arrangement, we reached an understanding, the courts know that these are not real compensation claims, and they dismiss them all, but the workers don't know that. So these are what I've explained are ways, and they are legal ways. But don't get me wrong, the employer isn't doing anything illegal besides passport retention, obviously. But when they put clauses in a contract, or when they go to a court in order to enforce it or to get compensation, they're not doing anything illegal. But what they are trying to do is hold back to the results of the sponsorship system. They're trying to keep the sponsorship system restrictions in the same manner that they've had before, but using different tools. And you can't blame them, because this is the only system they know. It's going to take a lot of management. It's going to take it's a steep learning curve for everyone in order to reach a stage where they utilize it and they actually avail of it. In order for the reform initiative, the brilliant and the very courageous reform initiative taken by Saudi Arabia to reach its fruitful outcome. My colleagues in Saudi Arabia, I'm sure they've taken a lot of what I've said into account. I'm sure this didn't escape them. But to keep in mind that even some of the issues that we had to deal with in Bahrain that might resemble trafficking in persons, might resemble modern slavery, is a result of employers trying to hold on to the old system. They try to hold on to a degree where they start breaking the law doing it. And I'm sure these are things that have not been missed by my colleagues in Saudi Arabia. But there's a lot of history, there's a lot of experience, a lot of big steps and small steps. Some of them have worked for Bahrain, some of them hasn't, and they don't need to do it alone. We've been here, and we're always ready to help. 10 minutes, Rico. This is the best I can do in it. I apologize if I've overstepped my time, but like I said, pointing out the potential challenges is one thing. Addressing them and then continuously reacting to them and adjusting, steering as you go along, adjusting to hundreds of thousands of employers that one way or the other will try to hold on to what they know, is something that will take time. So I will end up by saying one thing. When Saudi Arabia announced this program, I've heard a lot of our friends in the migration business around the world asking, what next? What else is Saudi Arabia going to do? And what I'm going to ask everyone on behalf of Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia would allow me, allow this very big step to settle, allow them to manage it, to manage the reactions, and manage the aftermath before we talk about next steps. Because this is the biggest step. This is the real one. If a worker has mobility, then there is no more kafala, as anyone knows it. It's been abolished. Anything else remains is just a resemblance of a migration management system. But in order for this big change to happen, we must allow both the economy, the employer, and the administrators and regulators in Saudi Arabia to manage it and adjust and steer and keep it going before we start asking for additional reforms, because anything that's going to come after this is definitely smaller than that. Thank you so much, and once again, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Osama. Thank you very much for that. I guess you're right. No? The challenge is really on how to address the reactions of the stakeholders, particularly the employers, as you said, they will not accept this easily because they have to change their ways, they have to change the culture, they have to change so many things. And the challenge for us, other stakeholders, is to how to react and to watch and to support this system. As you said, Saudi Arabia has taken a very big step on labor mobility. And a key feature of uh, the Kapala is that the restriction on labor mobility and restrictions on workers as they enter into the contract, end the contract, leave the kingdom, and also getting into another contract with another employer. But this is just the beginning, I guess, for Saudi Arabia, and rightly so. This is noteworthy to be watched, to be monitored, but more importantly, to be supported as it is a step we think is in the right direction. At this point, let me now call our next reactor, Honorable Sarah Lou Ariola, the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Affairs of the Republic of the Philippines Department of Foreign Affairs. Undersecretary Ariola is the Philippines head of delegation to the negotiations to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. As I mentioned in the beginning of the forum, the key provisions of the GCM, one of which the Philippines spearheaded during the GCM revocation, is on fair and ethical recruitment and labor mobility. Let me just quote that provision on paragraph 22G of the GCM, which states that, open quote, develop and strengthen labor migration and fair and ethical recruitment processes that allow migrants to change employers and modify the conditions or length of their stay with minimal administrative burden while promoting greater opportunities for decent work in respect for international human rights and labor law. As you know, the GCM was adopted by 152 UN member states in December 2018. It is very significant that all countries in the Middle East adopted the GCM. In a side event during the regional review and the implementation of GCM in the Asia Pacific last month, Undersecretary Ariola asserted that the GCM has facilitated labor reforms being implemented in many countries in the Middle East. Undersecretary Ariola, coming from a country of origin that is firstly and is relentless in its pursuit for the agenda for migrant rights protection. What would be your reaction to the sweeping reforms in Saudi Arabia, particularly on labor mobility as explained by Deputy Minister Al-Harbi? Please explain to us why these reforms are so important to the Philippines as a country of origin. Undersecretary Ariola, you may have the floor now.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Rico Fost, Honorable Deputy Minister Satam Al-Harbi, guests in the Diplomatic Corps, partners in migration, overseas Filipinos around the world, a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. We all heard the Philippine President say it is in his message today. Then, as now, I go by the words of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte that the Filipino is no slave to anyone, anywhere, and everywhere. The entire Philippine government's mission is simple: provide a safe and comfortable life for all Filipinos anywhere in the world. Our job at the Department of Foreign Affairs is even clearer. We must ensure the welfare, protect the rights, and better serve all overseas Filipinos wherever they may be. A major feat was accomplished in December 2018 when 152 United Nations member states adopted the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. The Global Compact, although non-binding, uses a common approach to international migration that is grounded in the values of state sovereignty, responsibility sharing, non-discrimination, and human rights. When I was appointed as Foreign Affairs Deputy Minister for Migrant Workers Affairs in July of 2017, one of my first important assignments was the negotiation of the GCM. As lead Philippine negotiator, I wanted the Philippines to propose provisions that are based on actual experiences of our migrant workers. We knew then that the Global Compact for Migration will be a document adopted by countries of origin, transit, and destination. A series of consultations with our ambassadors and consuls general preceded the negotiations to study the situation of our migrants in their respective posts. I also conducted stakeholders meetings with the migrant rights groups and migrant workers themselves to know what actions or reforms could be initiated to address these. We wanted a whole of government and whole of society approach to these consultations so that every sector in the migration process is heard and their inputs considered. During these consultations, two issues kept recurring, especially in the Middle East and Asia Pacific migration corridor. First was the confiscation of the passports of our migrant workers by their employers, and second were various issues on labor mobility, especially Filipino migrant workers in elementary occupations like household service workers. I saw the negotiations as a real and tangible opportunity to put these issues into light. Based on these findings and throughout the negotiations, the Philippines lobbied for the inclusion of the following provisions. First, fair and ethical recruitment that allows migrants to change employers and modify the conditions or length of their stay with their employers. Second, decent work and respect for international human rights. And third, measures prohibiting the confiscation of travel documents of migrants. Today, we have these three principles codified under Objective 6, Section 22, paragraphs G and H of the GCM, thanks to our traditional and non traditional partnerships we created during the negotiations. The behind the scenes story shows how important the GCM is for the Philippines. We fully support it as a primary UN process to protect all Filipino migrants against all forms of exploitation and abuse and guarantee decent work for them. It is in this context of the GCM that we sincerely welcome positive developments in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar in their efforts to reform the kafala system and provide greater protection for our overseas Filipino workers in the region. Saudi Arabia's labor reform initiative, which took effect last March 14, 2021, will significantly improve the working conditions of migrant workers in the kingdom, including almost the 800,000 Filipinos who are there now. Let me share with you briefly some of the problems that the labor reform initiative may address. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck, it resulted in the job loss of thousands of Filipinos in Saudi Arabia. Many private companies, especially small and medium enterprises, either closed down or implemented a no work, no pay policy to compensate for their economic losses. One of the labor reform initiatives gives employees the opportunity to transfer to a new employer if they have not received a salary for 3 consecutive months or if the employer has been absent. Instead of having to come home and be repatriated to the Philippines, Filipino migrant workers can now transfer to another employer in Saudi Arabia and continue earning for their families back home. Another challenge of the Philippines during the COVID-19 pandemic was to bring home overseas Filipinos who did not have exit visas. Thousands were stranded in the kingdom even if their employment contracts were already finished. If fully implemented, the labor reform initiative may finally solve this problem. As explained by Deputy Minister Al Harbi earlier, those who wish to leave the kingdom permanently, such as our many Filipino repatriates, can now apply for automatic exit visa. One key feature of this reform is that employers are not allowed to cancel any workers' valid automatic exit visa. The third development, which I wish to highlight, is the opportunity given to migrant workers to transfer employment if their employers fail to appear in at least two judicial hearings or two amicable settlement hearings. This is very important because many Filipino migrant workers have experienced difficulties not only in the enforcement of favorable decisions on their labor cases, but also in making their employers appear before the court. The kingdom's progressive initiatives would certainly ease restrictions on labor mobility of migrant workers. However, the work of the Philippine government does not stop here. I explained by our president, we must remain uncompromising against all other conditions that facilitate the ill treatment of our migrant workers anywhere in the world. Labor reforms is one of the products of the Global Compact for Migration. For a country of origin like the Philippines, the changes happening in the Middle East are very welcome, and we are very excited with the most recent developments. The positive changes in the Middle East show that continuous engagement with state partners work, and to effect genuine change, international cooperation and assistance are indispensable. The Philippines shall remain committed to the advancement of migrant workers' rights and welfare. We will continue to strongly advocate and work with all partners for the immediate fulfillment of the objectives of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Ultimately, we look to the day where we shall all contribute to shaping a promising future for all migrant families all over the world, free from the shackles of poverty, abuse, and intolerance. Thank you and good afternoon. Shukran jazilan. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas, mabuhay ang Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Ariola, for that well-argued comment on why the Philippines will be able to support the labor reform initiatives in Saudi Arabia. It is not just important, it is very important for our migrant workers at this time, especially now that we have proven to be useful in a time of pandemic. At this point, we will call on two of our invited interveners to give some comments again for 5 minutes at the maximum. And let me first call on Honorable Mohammed El Sarkane, the Chief of Mission of the IOM in Bahrain. In our past discussion with Mr. Sarkane, he has reiterated the need to incentivize businesses for these reforms and that political will for reforms should be trickled down to all stakeholders in a gradual manner. Mr. Sarkane, taking into account these points as well as the experience shared by our friend from Saudi Arabia, could you share your thoughts to us? You could take the floor now.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Foss. Let me first start by saying, how heartwarming it is to see this event show the spirit of partnership between countries of origin and destination, and what is a very, very important topic. Today we see partnership, not opposition. Today we see finding a common language to speak and support each other through transformation. This is an embodiment of the GCM Objective 23 on international cooperation and partnership. When I think about the kafala system, I usually think about leveling the playing field. How do you get the balance between employer and worker to be more equitable? And these reforms are definitely a very, very important direction into that. One thing we look at is example, at what is this going to do with wages? Yeah, you would see a lot of the opposition to those reforms say, well, the wages are going to increase. Yes, they will increase. They say, well, it won't stop increasing and that's gonna destroy our business model. I say, no, that's not true. It will go up to what the market value is of that specific work or that specific job. And this is what you want to reach. This is the competitive market that attracts skilled workers, that provides workers with adequate wage and resources that inevitably provides them with better protection as well. So it also, at the same time, supports nationalization campaigns, which is something that I know is a priority as well for countries in the Gulf. And when you look at it, one of the main challenges with nationalization campaigns is the wage discrepancy between foreign workers and the nationals. When the wage of the foreign worker is so low And can, as my good friend and colleague Mr. Al-Absi mentioned, the government itself, with its laws and regulations and systems in place, allows you to legally ensure that these wages remain low, then where is the incentive for the employers to pay more for national workers? So that is always a very important point to understand. Now, what I see, and I think the human rights angle has been covered thoroughly in the distinguished speakers before me, I'm going to look a little bit more at the economic angle. This decision, and again, I make reference to the excellent presentation of my good friend and colleague, Mr. Sattam Al-Harbi. This is a vision of the kingdom to transform into a labor market that attracts high skills, that are able to provide the adequate protection and improve the situation for its foreign workers working in the kingdom. Now, this can happen through gradual change, yes, that is for sure, but it also happens when employers themselves embrace that change. And that is something that is not easy because, as mentioned by Mr. Al-Absi before, this is the system, their business model that many of those businesses have been established on and have been operating with for decades, is one where they do not need to incentivize the worker to be able to stay, but rather they have it for granted already. Now, suddenly this is changing, which means that the business model will have to change to move from one that is more labor intensive based on low skilled labor for low wages to one that is more capital intensive based on more innovation, based on more technology. And that is a transformation that will be difficult, challenging, but it is the future. And now, of course, these mobility clauses support this transformation, but there has to be other elements as well that supports businesses to make this transformation. How do you, because some businesses will resist, some will want to transform, but they're not gonna know how. And these are why these capacity building, technical support, HR support that you can provide to businesses during this transformation period becomes incredibly more important. I think, and just to end my very short intervention, I think this is an immense step because this shows that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has full political will to do this transformation. These reforms that have been launched this year affect 7 million workers, and that is an incredible number. Challenging days ahead in terms of implementation, but we of course have absolute faith in the excellent capacity of our good friends and colleagues in the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development to be able to continue to respond and adapt to the changes required to implement these very important reforms. And I'm sure as well, when the time is ready, they will also look into other groups that represent the expatriate community in Saudi Arabia, specifically looking at domestic workers. So, as I mentioned, an incredible step forward, challenging, but there is a lot to learn from what happened in the region, but also noting that Saudi has a very specific context, and some of the things that happen in Saudi only happen in Saudi, and that is why we encourage our good friends and colleagues in Saudi Arabia to also make their own model of how to proceed forward with these very important reforms. So thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Foss, for inviting me to make my comments, and I think I may have taken 1 or 2 minutes extra, but thank you very much for your guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, Mr. Sarkani. I guess the running thread in your discussions from Mr. Alapsi to Undersecretary Ariola to you is the challenge for us is to adapt, respond, and adapt in this developing reforms in Saudi Arabia. As you said, there are things that's only happening in Saudi Arabia, and there are things that's only happening in some other countries. And the challenge for our friends in Saudi Arabia is to make a model out of this reforms that they're making. And basically, we're saying that you're right. We have transformed our relationship from one of opposition to that of partnership, from one of trying to find faults to finding common grounds. And all of these things, we need to have political will to do this. So thank you very much for those comments, Mohammed. At this point, let me call on another friend and who is also working for the IOM, Miss Christine Dady, the Chief of Mission of IOM Philippines. Ms. Dady, I've heard you talk about wonderful collaboration that is needed to make transformative changes on labor mobility and to keep this momentum of discussion going. How would you replicate these reforms in more countries of destination? May I invite you to expound on this, taking into account the reforms that are being implemented in Saudi Arabia? Ms. Dady, you may take the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Enrico Foss. Let me first recognize our distinguished panelists, Honorable Satam Al-Harbi and Honorable Asama Al-Absai. Assalamu alaikum. And USEC Undersecretary Sarah Ariola, as well as my friend and colleague, Mohammed. It's a real honor to be a reactor. Of course, being a reactor at the end means that everyone has said what I have wanted to say, but let me just emphasize a few points on behalf of IOM. We know that migration is a global reality, and that has been clearly demonstrated by the COVID pandemic that we are living through today. Although COVID is obviously a health crisis first and foremost, at no time has mobility come to such a crashing halt, where we've seen hundreds of thousands of migrant workers here in the Philippines return home and many more unable to deploy. And these unprecedented times, IOM believes that migration is still inevitable. It's still a driver in this interconnected world. It's still necessary where skills are needed to fill jobs for economies to flourish, as we see in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and still desirable in terms of the benefits that migration brings to themselves, to families, and to both the sending and receiving country. If well governed, we continue to see that migration is an engine of economic growth. With the adoption of the Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Migration, member states have committed to making migration work for all, both sending and receiving countries. The GCM has been, as it has been noted, is the first ever intergovernmentally negotiated UN agreement on a common approach to managing migration. As Secretary Loksin calls it, it's a compact of decency. And as we call it, it's also a compact of collaboration. My colleague before pointed out Objective 23, strengthening international cooperation and global partnerships. And as Mohammed said, this is the GCM in reality. This is the GCM in action, these reforms that we are seeing today between Saudi Arabia and the partnership that we see with the government of the Philippines. We very much welcome the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's labor reform, which aims at granting foreign workers more freedom in job mobility and lessening restrictions, exit and re-entry into the kingdom. These reforms, we believe, like ASEC Sarah Ariola, that they will directly reduce the vulnerability of foreign workers, OFWs, to exploitation and abuse, as well as enhance their living and working conditions in Saudi Arabia. We believe they will have a tangible impact on the prevention of exploitation and abuse of vulnerable workers. They will now, as has already been extensively pointed out, employees will enjoy the ability to choose and change jobs more easily, while employers will benefit from more mobile and flexible labor workforce. It is a win-win for everyone. It's in line with our fair and ethical recruitment and safeguards that ensure decent work. And it is particularly welcomed at this time of an unprecedented global pandemic, which once again acutely demonstrates the challenging situation faced by migrants and people on the move. We believe that this important step towards enhancing migration governance in Saudi Arabia is a demonstration that labor migration does not stop and improvements can continue to be made even in a time of lockdowns and amidst uncertainty. So congratulations to the governments for these really impressive reforms at such a time of crisis. In terms of your question, Enrico, how can we share this experience and how can we replicate this experience? Given the sheer number of migrant workers, particularly from the Philippines, that go to Saudi Arabia every year, Saudi Arabia is the top destination for migrant workers in the Philippines. This will serve as an example to other countries of the reforms that are indeed necessary. I worked in Indonesia 20 years ago, and these reforms that are being made now, I think, show how much the bar has been moved forward. And I think that Saudi Arabia and their really impressive changes to the labor code that affects, as Mohammed said, I think 7 million migrant workers, really serve as an example. And we will continue as the UN's migration agency to highlight these as something that should be replicated to others. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a panelist and a reactor, and sincere congratulations and my best wishes during this Ramadan season, wishes of peace, partnership, and solidarity with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christine, for that comments of yours. Indeed, it's a win-win for everyone, even in this time of pandemic when there is restrictions on mobility. Migration would still be a global reality, and migration would still be a driver for development. And as you said, if successful, this reform is successful and then is being applied to Philippine migrant workers working in Saudi Arabia. There are about 850,000 of them in Saudi Arabia. This could set an example for all other sending countries to follow. And then this would also set the wheels going for the successful reforms in the labor sector of the Saudi Arabia that would benefit both the migrant workers, the employers, and the governments of the Philippines and the other countries and the Saudi Arabia. So thank you very much, Christine, for that. At this point, allow me to introduce two other speakers. They are both representatives of their respective countries in other countries, in Saudi Arabia as well as in the Philippines. They have on-the-ground experience on how it is to deal with reforms on migrant workers, on concerns raised by their respective nationals in their host countries. So, given these reforms in Saudi Arabia that is ongoing, it's interesting to know the thoughts of our ambassadors in those two countries. Let me first call on our ambassador, the Philippine ambassador to Riyadh, the Honorable Ambassador Adnan Alonto, and they will be followed by the Saudi Arabia ambassador to the Philippines, uh, Ambassador Abdullah N.A. Al-Busairi. At this point, let me call on first Ambassador Alonto. Sir, Excellency, you may have the floor, but please limit it to 5 minutes so that we'll have more time for discussions later on. Ambassador Alonto, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Rico Povas, my good friend. And I will try to my best to be on time. And first off, of course, I'd like to greet our distinguished speakers, our distinguished guests, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. I wish to congratulate initially the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs and the Saudi Ministry of Human Resource and Social Development, or MHRSD, and the International Organization for Migration for the successful conduct of this virtual forum. I also wish to thank Deputy Minister Satam Al-Harbi of the MHRSD, a close partner of the Philippine Embassy here in Riyadh, for sharing with us today the recent labor reforms being implemented in Saudi Arabia. I have witnessed the implementation of several great reforms in the kingdom since I started serving as Philippine ambassador to Saudi Arabia almost 4 years ago. I am confident that these labor reforms in Saudi Arabia will have far-reaching and positive effects to the working environment and competitiveness of the kingdom's labor market. It may be noted that most of these programs are technology-driven. I think that capitalizing on the efficiency value of technology is now the norm for entities seeking to improve their competitiveness. The wage protection system and contract digitization certainly improve transparency in the fulfillment and enforcement of contractual obligations. These programs, together with an institutionalized information campaign and a strengthened dispute resolution mechanism, will surely reduce the incidence of employer-employee conflict, thereby allowing the MHRSD to channel its time and resources to other worthwhile projects, programs, and activities as well. I also take particular interest in the insurance program for workers' rights. I think this will effectively prevent the occurrence of workers being deprived of their hard-earned salaries and benefits due to mismanagement or bankruptcy of their employing companies. This indeed is a great innovation and safety net for workers. On the enhancement of the contractual relationship between employees and employers, I believe that the contractual relationship reform under the LRI would incentivize workers to develop their skills, increase their wages, and reduce incidents of employer-employee dispute. I think it is but natural for individuals to maximize their earning potentials. If workers are given opportunities to land higher paying jobs elsewhere, then they would most certainly exert efforts to improve their marketability and attractiveness to prospective employers. They would either hone their skills or further acquire new skills to gain a competitive advantage. restricting freedom of movement would just breed mediocrity and indifference. Employers, knowing their workers could now easily seek greener pastures, could have to make drastic changes in their human resource management policies and operations to encourage performing workers to stay and to attract better talents to join their teams. This could be done by offering better compensation packages, training opportunities, and other non-wage benefits. I strongly believe that the race to get the cream of the crop of workers would significantly improve the overall experience in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. On the matter of the LRI aligning Saudi Arabia with the best international labor practices, allow me to highlight the following. Number one, the International Labor Organization, or the ILO, Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, considers the elimination of forced or compulsory labor as a fundamental workers' rights. The LRI mechanism, allowing expatriate workers to leave the kingdom upon completion of their employment contracts, effectively reinforces this fundamental right. Number two, the ILO's Employment Policy Convention of 1964 provides that member states shall implement an active policy designed to promote full, productive, and treaty-chosen employment, or freely chosen employment. I think that the LRI's Employee Mobility Service, which allows expatriate workers to transfer to another employer or sponsor upon the completion of their employment contracts, without the need for employer's approval, effectively promotes the rights of workers to choose their employment as espoused by the Employment Policy Convention of 1964. In closing, I wish to congratulate the Saudi Arabian government, my host government, particularly the Ministry of Human Resource and Social Development, for formulating and successfully launching these labor reforms. I further wish that these reforms succeed and evolve to encompass all sectors of the labor force, and particularly the more vulnerable sectors of the Saudi labor market. I'm referring to the household sector of the labor market. Lastly, while it is too early to tell whether the LRI will be a resounding success, since it's been just a little over a month of its implementation, it is my belief that the momentum built by these reforms is now positively irreversible. That is my view, and I am glad that I was posted here in Saudi Arabia this time, and I'm truly grateful for the successes in the labor reform initiatives that it has implemented. Thank you very much again for this opportunity to intervene, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Alonto, for that comments and on-the-ground explanation of what is happening in your country of assignment. Indeed, we join you in putting on the challenge to our Saudi friends to maybe include in a future date, if not sooner, the reforms on the application to other sectors, referring particularly to those in the domestic work. With that, I guess we will continue to engage with our Saudi counterparts and friends and see where it goes. And as we continue to support the reforms that is being initiated and being implemented by Saudi Arabia. At this point, let me now call on another on-the-ground person, His Excellency Abdullah N.A. Al-Busairi, the ambassador of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to the Republic of the Philippines. Ambassador Bosairi, uh, you may take the floor now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellencies, peace, mercy, and blessings of God. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum on labor, mobility, and human rights. I believe that His Excellency Saffam al-Harbi, the Deputy Minister of Inspection and Development of War, Environment, discusses all issues related to immigration and labor mobility. I want, besides that, the Kingdom expresses a great reception and the right of all workers, and that we are pleased with the presence of more than 850,000 overseas Filipino employees in the Kingdom. The provisions and the improvement of the work environment are ongoing, and this in line with the initiative of the National Transformation Program and the Kingdom Vision 2030. Thank you for you giving me this opportunity to ask the Mabuhay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that very succinct message.
I 2 minutes, yes.
Thank you,
No,
thank you very much. Thank you very much for that succinct intervention, and the message was quite clear to all of us that we should pursue these reforms as your country is pursuing it. At this point, I now open the floor for questions and comments. But while we were discussing, I have received, I think, one or two questions already. If I may be allowed to read it, this is addressed to the speakers, maybe particularly to our main resource person. Let me read the comment. This is from an overseas Filipino worker. He says that his contract is finished last October 2020. He now wants to transfer to another company. He was already hired and he has signed a contract with that other company. He applied through the Kiwa QIWA platform, but still the old employer still has not issued a release even if the contract is already finished. His question, what will happen to him if his old company does not release him? What can be done about his transfer? That's a first question, I think, for Mr. Al-Harbi.
Thank you, Mr. Foz. I would like to actually to answer this. Need to look to the case, but sure that the transaction happened this way. The employee find a new employer if he wants to change employer. Once they agreed on the term and condition, the new employer submit the request through Quwa platform, and then once he submit that request, he will transfer. There is one condition: if the contract with old employer is still valid, he will be transferred after 3 months, which is we call it noticing period. If the contract expired or the employee has no contract, he will be transferred directly to the new employer. As I mentioned, more than 15,000 employees transferred within last 3 weeks. We have to look to this case. I urge the one who asked the question to submit the request through help channels, so we can reach out to him or her and help out and solve the case.
That was very clear. If he did not understand your response, he could always go to the help channel and explain further what he's asking about his transfer to one employee to another. There's another question here. When Filipino workers are repatriated by the Philippine government, what happens to their unpaid wages? Are there mechanisms available to them so that they can recover unpaid wages and other monetary benefits that were not paid? This is especially in the time of pandemic when a lot of migrant workers from the Philippines were repatriated, and then the first thing that was their concern was to get them out of and then bring them home to the Philippines. And sometimes there are a lot of unpaid wages or uncollected wages and benefits that were not collected by our workers. So the question really is, um, how do you go about this? There are a lot of workers now in the Philippines that are asking this kind of question. Please.
Yeah, first of all, since there is a contract between the employee and the employer is still mandated to pay the wages. Since based on the labor law, once the employee has offered and available to conduct his duty, the employer are mandated to pay all the rights for the employees. So the cases during COVID-19, any employee who didn't receive the wages, the employer has to pay, so they can submit the request to the ministry as a ticket, and will force the employer to pay all the due wages. Also, this is an occasion to mention one of the initiative has been approved from the cabinet minister, which is insurance policy, and that is financed by the government. And now we are in the implementation phase within the next few months. This insurance policy will cover all the salaries and rights, and also airline tickets for employee who working in private sector in case of solvency of that company. If the company or employer failed to pay, the insurance policy will cover all the rights. And they mention, also sure that this is financed by the government as an initiative to ensure the employees' rights. Also, during COVID-19, the government provide many services for the expatriates. One of the initiative was the housing and accommodation standard. The government issued the standard for accommodation and ensure that each employee has allocated and a proper accommodation linked with their identification number, and ensure conduct a field visit to ensure that housing and accommodation are meeting the standards of which has been approved by the government. And also there are multi different initiatives, including the extension of exit visa of those who are in vacation during the pandemic and couldn't return to the country. The government extended the visa so they will be allowed to come back whenever the flights became available, and many other initiatives that help and support employees in the private sector.
Thank you very much for those clear answers. But I think the difficulty that they are encountering is that they are not anymore in Saudi Arabia. They are now back in the Philippines. And I've seen one of your initiatives that are using the electronic mail and electronic means to file dispute resolutions. Could they avail of those mechanism also, even though they are in the Philippines already?
They can use either the friendly settlement tool, and also they can reach out through the embassy. They can, if they can, also online email through emails, and we'll follow the cases. The employees submit the case through the ministry email. In the website, there is a contact email. They can submit the request, and it goes to the specialist department, and we reach out to the employer and ensure that the rights reach out to them, the employees.
That's good. So they could also go to the embassy, to Ambassador Al-Basiri, no? To file their request.
We have actually, and Mr. Basiri can also clarify that we have signed a labor representative in the embassy. So now in Philippines was the first country who hosts labor now there is a labor office representing the ministry in the ministry in the embassies.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So
labor attaché, yeah.
Yeah, there are clear procedures or avenues wherein the workers who feel aggrieved because they were not able to be paid their wages during the pandemic, they have to go home to the Philippines, could secure back whatever they think is, and then there's an avenue for this. Thank you very much for those explanations. Another question coming from an overseas Filipino worker named Ms. Fuentes. He says, what remedies are available to migrant workers who are being threatened to pay for their ikama if they plan to leave their current employer?
Thanks for Mr. Swante for the question. The labor law stated that all fees are paid by the employer. So the employee doesn't have, and they are not obligated to pay any fees for their recruitment and for their residency in Saudi Arabia. Everything are paid by the employer, and any act of asking the employee to pay those fees consider evaluation to labor law, and also it can be an indicator of human trafficking. So, and we urge the employee, urge you, Mr. Santos, or any employee to reach out to the ministry, either through its channels, and we'll act upon that.
Okay, Ms. Fuentes, you heard that, huh? If they continue to threaten you that they have to pay for your ikama, go to the ministry, and they are saying, our deputy minister here is saying that they will act on it. So you have your avenue for redress.
And also here, this is not today, it's implemented like 7 years ago. If an iqama is expired, the employee can transfer it directly to any other employer. So the expiration of iqama is the burden of employer. So now with the labor mobility also, it's much easier since it's electronic service now. So if the employer asks you to pay, you don't have to pay. If the iqama expired, you can transfer to any other employer.
Okay, thank you very much for that. This is quite technical. The next question is quite technical. He's saying that from an overseas Filipino worker named De Vera. He says that what are the remedies available to migrant workers who already won their labor cases in courts, but the execution of the respective decisions have been delayed for several years? They already won the case in labor court, but the execution is not being implemented.
Yeah, once the case has been, or the court has been decided in the court, it goes to the execution court. The execution court, they implement the ruling here. I think the case where Mr. De Vera mentioned is the cases that has been in insolvency. I think also like Bin Laden, Saudi OJ companies where it's still some cases hasn't been solved. And that's why one of the reasons the government has issued the insurance policy. So with the insurance policy, which has been approved recently, once the company failed to pay due to insolvency or couldn't pay the rights for employees, there is no need actually for the employee to go to the court. The insurance policy will cover all the costs and pay for these cases.
Thank you very much for that answer, Deputy Minister. Another question. This is a question directed to, not to you now. This is under question directed to Undersecretary Ariola from a certain Rene Arangone. How does the Philippine government reach out to domestic workers and help protect their rights when sometimes they are not allowed by their employers to go outside their home?
Yes. Actually, thank you for that question, Asek. No, we just want to, if you're watching through Facebook Live, we have OFW Help. It's a 24/7 Facebook page that's being moderated by the Department of Foreign Affairs. If there's anything that our household service workers or domestic workers need, they can use the messenger page and message us if they need help. Of course, there are also hotlines, but I think it's easier for household service workers to have to reach us through Facebook, because that's already a platform that's very familiar to them. There are also hotlines for the embassy. There's also a Facebook page of the embassy and the Consulate General in Jeddah. They can reach us through that. And also, of course, the hotlines of both the embassy and the consulate. Sometimes, some people want to be more creative, they use their friends to be able to reach out to us. We are open. We are 24/7 available to be reached by our people in the Middle East, especially our household service workers. Thank you, Assistant Secretary, please.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Ariola. A question for our Deputy Minister. This says it's about the end of service benefits. He says that in view of the pandemic, are employers allowed to change entitlement of migrant workers in their end of service benefits? One employer said, maybe his employer, that it can only release 50% of ESB regardless of the period of years worked. Is that allowed?
I didn't actually get the question right, but the end of service is due at the end of service once the contract ends, and the employee is entitled for the first 5 years, completed first 5 years, half salary for each year. And I'm not sure what's the question actually meant, but no rights for the employers to negotiate or deduct any thing from that amount.
I think the employer is saying that because of the hardship brought about by pandemic, I would only pay you 50% of what is stated in the law. Is that allowed?
No, definitely not allowed.
Okay.
Even the end of service is considered one part of the wages. So there's no right for the employer to negotiate or deduct any of those rights for the employees. So this case is illegal, definitely, and it's not acceptable.
Again, there's a question. It's a long question actually, but the essence of the question is: when will the domestic workers be included in the reform?
Good. It's an important question actually. As Mr. Arabsi mentioned, this opportunity also to thank all the actors for their remarks, valuable remarks, and appreciate all their participation. It's first, would like to ensure that we spent more than 2 years in drafting the policies and ensure that this initiative will implemented in the right way, covering all lab holes and cover all the issues that has been identified during the workshops that we conducted with employers, employees, different stakeholders. Also, we looked into different practices in different countries. One of them, our colleagues in Bahrain, and we met also labs in different occasions, and was one of our inspiration in this initiative. We reach, after more than 2 years, we reach a maturity stage to launch the services, closing all the lab holes and including the things that mentioned, for example, in the contracts, the condition, the contract. That's why we submit or completed the authenticated or the registration of contract before we launching the initiative to ensure that all contracts are comply with the labor law. So we didn't make an space or any exit for anyone who will misuse the contracts to get out of the objective of this initiative. In competitive condition, we didn't allow, the labor law didn't allow the employer actually to put a condition for employee preventing the employee from working for a competitor. So if this condition is stated in the contract, the court doesn't look at it and it's not binding for the employee. Our labor law, as I mentioned, doesn't recognize or doesn't give the rights for the employer to restrict the employee from working for a competitor. Also for conditions, it's subject and governed by the labor law to ensure that the justice and fairness from fairness condition from employees and employer. So as I started, this is a big change in Saudi Arabia. It's affecting more than 70 or 80% of labor in Saudi Arabia. The other 20% is domestic labor. As we spent all these years in moderating and drafting and completing the services and policies for this initiative, and we launched it a few weeks ago. Now we'll start the new journey on domestic labor. Now the domestic labor are under different law, which is domestic labor law. They are not governed by labor law. So we are now reviewing the domestic labor law and reviewing the possible enhancement and changes to submit also or implement a new version of or a new reform for domestic labor that's aligned with our vision and aligned with other enhancements and developments in Saudi Arabia. Currently, the domestic labor are governed by Musanad platform. Musanad platform is also a technical platform. All transactions are registered from first transaction of request for the employer to request a service from or request recruiting domestic labor, and all these are governed by this platform under the supervision of the ministry, and also linked with our embassies in the sending countries. Also, we have a new regulation for receiving the employees, ensure that the employer provide the accommodation, pay the wages through protection system. Now we are in the phases of implementing the protection system in domestic labor. So the enhancements are undergoing, and as I mentioned, we'll have a new release of domestic labor law soon, inshallah. I think for the question Also, that's answer the question for domestic labor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We're optimistic that soon it will be included. I think Mr. Alabsi would want to contribute to the discussion, having had that experience also. I know for a fact that when I was working and doing liaison work with them, is that they didn't include the domestic workers first in their labor reform, but later on a later stage, they included them, even in the flexi visa system. I think Mr. Alabsi, would you want to take the floor? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I will be brief, but this is something that both the Philippines and Bahrain have attempted to tackle, and I have personally attempted to tackle it with most of the domestic worker sending countries. Unless we manage to reduce the recruiting cost of recruiting domestic workers, it is going to be extremely difficult to get a similar level of reform accepted by the employers. What you have today is the lowest amount paid by an employer to get a domestic worker is $4,000, and in some cases it reaches $8,000. I know in Saudi Arabia there was a time, it has been reduced now, but in Saudi Arabia it reached a time where it exceeded $10,000 that is paid for the recruiting agents. Now, we realize that the domestic worker herself or himself did not receive any of that money, is not liable for that money. But the cost is so prohibitive that it makes reform difficult, but also it pushes some of the employers to try to preserve that investment, to try to control and to keep, because it's a big investment. So we need to work as sending and receiving countries to reducing that cost to an acceptable, manageable level. That will allow us to get the reforms to fully be inclusive with the domestic workers. We have seen people who pay more. Enrico, this is ridiculous, because I have seen people pay as a Bahraini. Okay, they pay 24% of their annual income to get a domestic worker.
My God, it's so high.
It is too high, but because you've got two working parents, both at the job, they need somebody at the home. Some people take loans from the bank in order to pay the agents to get the domestic worker. So we have discussed this. I know I've discussed it with you in USEC, Sarah, and I've discussed it in India, I've discussed it in Indonesia, I have discussed it in Sri Lanka. I have been all over the world trying to get this to reduce it in order for it to have mobility. If someone, to be honest, we have to be honest to people, if someone has taken a loan or paid 2 months' salary, his salary, to the agent to get a worker to come, and that worker leaves after a year, he can't afford to do the cycle again. And what we have done over here is that both sending government and receiving government only worked to make the recruiting agents richer. The worker didn't get richer, the employer didn't get richer, and the governments just got headaches.
It's the middleman.
It's the middleman that's getting richer. We must address that.
Okay, I think the challenge is clear. No? Address the question of the middleman. Anyway, I think this is really a real problem on the ground, but on the GCM, on the Global Compact on Migration, this is what we call always the twin: fair recruitment, fair and ethical recruitment, and decent work. That goes hand in hand altogether. So if you're saying reforms, to include migrant domestic workers, we must be able to ensure that the principles of fair and ethical recruitment and decent work are in place. So I guess that's a common ground for Bahrain and for the Philippines, and could be a common ground. And I guess it could be a strong common ground for Saudi Arabia and the Philippines and some other sending countries in pursuing this kind of principles. So addressing what we call the middleman. Okay, so just to be very clear about this for our migrant workers who are listening, our friends from Saudi Arabia is saying that they're not close to the idea of including the reforms, the household service workers. It's just a matter of time. And in fact, even now, without even saying that they are in the LRI, they're saying there are enhancements being done and this must be observed. And it are maybe what we call baby steps towards a full inclusion of the migrant domestic workers in the reform that is being implemented in Saudi Arabia. In some countries, it took some time, and maybe it will be the same experience. But as I said earlier on, it's a process of engagement. It's a process of finding a common ground. It's a process of developing and strengthening our partnership. So rest assured that our government, the government of the Philippines, will definitely engage with the government of Saudi Arabia to push these reforms and to support each other in this reform movement. So maybe I have one here comment, and I like to read this because it's not really a question, but a comment from overseas Filipino worker saying that from a certain Mr. Corpus saying that I am an overseas Filipino worker in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. This is not a question, but I take this opportunity to convey our profound gratitude to the Saudi government for its generosity in providing free and accessible COVID-19 vaccine to expatriate workers that include us Filipinos. Shukran Jasilan. Thank you very much from the bottom of the heart of our migrant workers who benefited from this generosity of the Saudi government, including them in the vaccination program. This goes also for our friends in other countries, including Bahrain, of course, that we know that they're also vaccinating the migrant workers in Bahrain. So it's a thank you and a call to all countries out there that please vaccinate also the expat. Let's leave no one behind in this campaign to heal as one. Yeah. So again, so let's go back to my set of questions. I'm flooded with questions. So another question is, this is from our ambassador. This is a question for Ambassador Alonto from certain OFW Sheila Fuentes. What assistance can the Philippine Embassy provide if employer refuses to pay for my benefits, end of service, benefits, vacation leave, etc.? Ambassador Alonto, would you want to respond to this question, please?
Certainly. Thank you very much for the question. I'd like to mention that the Philippine Embassy has a assistance to national section, and in our assistance to national section, we have a couple of case officers there who are assigned to assist our OFWs in their ESBs or their end of service benefits. And certainly they could just go to the embassy and bring their cases to the assistance to national section. and case officers will be working on their cases as far as that is concerned. And the other thing is we also have our we can also be contacted through our messenger. We have a Facebook page, Philippine Embassy in Saudi Arabia, and there you could send messages through messenger. And we have individuals who are who do nothing but answer and respond to queries in our messenger portals. And certainly, if you could also send your the information regarding your ESP cases through our messenger. So you have two ways actually doing that. Going to the embassy, which might be a little tedious right now, given that because of the social distancing protocols, you need to get an appointment, and so. But if you cannot wait for that, you could send your case and all your documentation through Messenger, through our Facebook page, Philippine Embassy in Saudi Arabia.
So they could go to the embassy either virtually or physically. All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Alonso. And the embassy is very much willing to assist you, but you need to get into the details of what is your request is all about, and the details on who's the company and everything. So you must communicate with the embassy. Go to the embassy either virtually or physically. Another question for our Deputy Minister, Satam Al-Harbi. Is the requirement for insurance policy applicable to all companies, including small companies and individual employers?
Yes, the new insurance policy, which will cover all workers in the private sector, and it's mandatory for employers, as I mentioned, financed by the government. So all workers working in Saudi Arabia will be covered in the day one of the implementation. And also, I'd like to comment on the previous question for delay in wages or any complaint that employee want to raise. We have an application. It's available on all mobile phones, either Android or iOS. It's called Ma'al al-Rast. It's both in English and Arabic application. So the employee can file once they get in the phone. There is different type of classification, either evaluation to labor law, delay in wages, different actually categories of evaluation that they can submit. The service is very private and ensure the privacy of the employee. So we have a department, it's a dispatching department to receive all tickets, and within 24 hours of receiving the ticket, they go in the field and conduct a visit and ensure that the employer pay and meet his requirement. Another tool also available is friendly settlement. They can access the friendly settlement by their number, Iqama number, and submit request, and the ministry will directly set an appointment and invite the employer to settle the case. So these are the main two sources that all employees in Saudi Arabia, either Saudi or non-Saudi, can use to pursue any rights they want if there is any delay of their rights. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much, Deputy Minister. A comment coming from Ms. Susan Ople from the Blas Ople Foundation, one of the NGOs here or the civil society organizations helping migrant workers, particularly those trafficked persons. She says, may I suggest that the Philippine Embassy come up with a FAQ on our native language about all these reforms to help our workers. While, yeah, let me just point this out that maybe the embassy could come out with it, but more importantly, I think if the Saudi government, uh, talking about for all migrant workers, come out with a FAQ in the languages of your migrant workers. That would be a great help in involving and empowering our migrant workers, including the Filipino migrant workers in Saudi Arabia, to support and to have access, real access to the reforms you are implementing. And if it is a suggestion to the Philippine Embassy, if I may, it may be a suggestion also to the Saudi Ministry of Labor and Human Settlement.
If you
Go
allow
ahead.
me to comment, we have in our website the Ministry, the Human Resources, Social
Development.
English website. We have placed all the guidelines, and I think also FNQ is there. If it's not there, I promise it's gonna be there within 1 week, but I think it's there, we'll check again. And all the related documents, it has been submitted in the website. We have a call center with 9 languages. Anyone can, the call center for the ministry, 1911. It's also mentioned in the this number also in the ministry website. We are more than happy to provide all embassies with any document that want to translate to different languages. We provide in Arabic and English, and we are so happy to provide in different languages.
Did I hear it right, Deputy Minister, that you're willing to support the embassy initiative to translate this reform initiatives into the language understandable by their own migrants?
Yes, we'll translate it to the language that we want. Any embassy that want to translate it to their languages, we will do the translation, and they will help us and review it, and then they can send it through their channels.
Can I get the comments of Ambassador Alonto, please, on this? Because actually the suggestion was really for the Embassy of the Philippines.
Yes, yes, ASEC Rico. In fact, I think the suggestion of Ms. Susan Ople is in order, and I think it is a very good suggestion, and we have duly noted the same. Incidentally, the Philippine Embassy in Riyadh maintains a database, a knowledge database, which we have made available to our public, and it's the link for that database, knowledge database, is in our both in our Facebook page as well as in our website, and it's actually an FAQ link that answers different types of questions, labor and otherwise, and so we will definitely include the features of these LRI in that FAQs, which is already available anyway. So for our kababayans to read, and it's a very good suggestion. Well noted.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for this. I think we are seeing the concrete results of a partnership and cooperation between the embassy and the Ministry of Labor and the Social Development. Now, the next question is, if the employer finds a new job and had been released and transferred, will he be paid the end of service benefits, unused vacation leaves, etc.? So the situation is that he had transferred to a new job, he has not been paid is the ESB and the vacation leave that's supposedly monetized. Well, could he still be um, benefiting for those ESBs?
Thanks. It's important questions. Uh, there is difference between the employee's rights and the right to transfer. So the right to transfer doesn't abolish the employee's rights in either wages or in the service or any other rights. As stated in labor law, the end of services become eligible once the employees leave the job, either except the cases where the fault in the part of the employee, like in cases of absent, the employee absent from work doesn't appear. So this is failure from employee, and then he'll not be entitled for end of service, or break the contract without a proper reason. If the employee break the contract with a proper reason, then he'll be entitled for end of service. But if the reason for breaking the contract is illegal, then the employee won't be eligible for end of service. So if we take a case, for example, if an employee has a contract for 2 years and completing the contract, and the end of the contract, a message will be sent for both parties that the contract will be end within 90 days. Both parties, the employee and employer, they have the choice either to renew or end the contract. So if the employee decide to not renew the contract, he can definitely move to another employer and still be entitled for all benefits based on the contract, end of services and other benefits.
Well, thank you very much. I think that would be our last question for this time, for this virtual forum, and last comment. Before we end this forum, I'd like to ask each of the speakers to give us maybe their last words before we end this. Could we start with Mr. Alabsi? Maybe for 1-2 minutes. Sure.
Less.
Parting words.
Even less. I'll end with what I started, which is to congratulate my colleagues in Saudi Arabia on this very important, very big move, to wish them the good luck, and to just tell everyone to understand it is not easy to roll it out. It's a big change, and a lot of change management needs to happen in order for it to achieve its desired fruits. This is going to take time. It's going to take time to change how people think, how employers behave, how even the employees and how they behave. We are not dealing with a change of a law. We're dealing with a change of a socio-economic system. And the biggest move has already been made by the authorities in Saudi Arabia, and it's an important one. The rest is to help get it through, help roll it out, manage the changes, manage the adverse. There will always be an adverse impact of people who don't know how to learn how to change their ways. They're good people, they're good employers, they just don't know how to learn new skills. And we have to manage it for the better, for the greater good. And I'm sure my colleagues in Saudi Arabia are more than capable of doing that, and good luck to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alabsi. Undersecretary Ariola, any last words?
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Foss. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for this game changer. When we found out about this labor reform initiative, we were very ecstatic because This is what we've always been praying for. And we just want to assure that the government of Saudi Arabia that we are here to support them every step of the way. We know it's a difficult process, but the government of the Philippines is here to support you and we of course rejoice in this initiative, and we know it's difficult, but in migration governance, it can't be only be done by a single government, and international assistance and cooperation is indispensable. And as we have worked so hard with and in our partnership with Bahrain, we stand ready to strengthen and our partnership with Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Ariola. Mohammed, any word?
Thank you, Rico. I mean, I think everything has been said, really. I mean, I would just again recognize the partnership spirit of our discussion today. This for me and for IOM to see that as one of the custodians for the GCM. This is the change that we would like to see. This is the change that we would like to advocate for, is how countries of origin and destination work together in issues that are so complex and that addresses and impacts both countries of origin and destination the same. Through partnership, collaboration, and good faith, these reforms would prevail to the impact that we're all looking for. So again, congratulations on a very informative event, and congratulations again to my good friend and colleague Sultan Al-Harbi for spearheading these very challenging reforms in the kingdom. And we look forward to working closely with all stakeholders here in the next steps, inshallah. Thank you very much. Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you, Muhammad. Christine?
Yes, thank you. At the heart of all these changes are migrants and workers, people, and we're all migrants ourselves. So I just really want to congratulate all of you, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Philippines government, for really putting migrants first and enacting these sweeping changes. And I think it's a wonderful step forward, as President Duterte said, and leaving nobody behind. So really congratulations and Ramadan Kareem to all of you.
Thank you, Christine. Ambassador Al-Basairi, you're still there? Ambassador? Okay, I think he left already. Ambassador Alonto, please.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Rico. I just wanted to say that it's been a privilege, serving our people here in Saudi Arabia and working pretty well with our host government in this day and age of development. And I congratulate the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Of course, Deputy Minister Satam Al-Harbi for the vision and the courage to proceed with all of these reforms. And I stand here very proud of my government, the Republic of the Philippines, and the President of the Philippines, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, for its steadfastness in his unfailing efforts to render protection to our OFWs. So I've been here in this country 30 years back, and it's hardly recognizable right now, but it's certainly for the positive. It's certainly positively for the better. And as I said in my comment earlier, the positive developments in Saudi Arabia has become now irreversible. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Alonto. And now I give the floor to our main resource person, Deputy Minister Satam Al-Harbi. Deputy Minister, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Secretary, Mr. Nose. You are amazing in your coordination and leading also and create this panel and drive it in a perfect way. And my best wishes and thanks for the distinguished delegates who were enriched this panel, and I benefit from their intervention and appreciate all what has been said. And also, I am so grateful and honored to be the main discussant in this panel. And I'm happy to share this initiative in this panel and hope that's the best for all migrant workers. We are in Saudi Arabia. We are considered migrant workers one of the main sources for the economy, and as Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development, we are working in many initiatives to ensure that they have a good life condition, good working experience, wants to increase the inclusion and the participation in labor market. So we are there. There are many programs, initiatives in the pipelines, and this is a start of a journey, and we are looking to be one of the desired destination for migrant workers in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Al-Harbi. On behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs and maybe on behalf of the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development, Saudi Arabia, we thank all for being a participant, being a speaker, being a resource person for this virtual forum. I hope you have learned a good thing in this virtual forum. I hope also that this will not be the last or the first. This be the first of a series of engagement that we will be doing. The hard work is still to come. The challenges are still to be met, and only then we could prove ourselves that we are truly partners if all the reforms are being implemented. And as Christine had said, at the center of all of this is the migrant. If all of us could work together for the migrants and for their rights and for their welfare, it's a win-win for the government. It's a win for the migrants. It's a win for our development. And so with that, thank you very much, everyone. Have a pleasant morning, afternoon, evening. In the Philippines, we always say mabuhay. Thank you very much.
Mabuhay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salam.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.